Hi everyone, it's Annie, and today is my October reading wrap-up video. I read 21 books this month, which is absolutely not my usual amount of books. I usually read way less than that a month. I don't know what came over me this month, but I just read and read and read, and I liked most of the books I read, so let's get right into it. The first book I read was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. And I really liked this book. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. I thought it was really funny. It's like a crime humor book, and I really recommend it. The second book I read was The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it. I read the synopsis about this guy who keeps living his life over and over again. You know, after he dies, he just is born again into the same family and same life in the same time period. And it's such an interesting concept, and I really, really loved the synopsis, but I just didn't love the execution so much. I mean, I thought it was really interesting, but I also feel like the protagonist was really boring. No offense to anyone who likes this book, but it was just a boring, straight white guy, and that's a little overdone, and I just wish that it had been a little more interesting in that regard, but I really liked the concept, and I do recommend this book if it sounds interesting to you. The third book I read this month was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. Kesey? I wanted to read more modern classics this year. I guess it's considered a modern classic, and I really liked it. It was very, very interesting. I actually read it because I wanted to watch the Ratchet Netflix show, which I have started. It's just okay, to be honest, but that's not what this video is about. I really liked the book. It was very, very interesting, and I really liked the narrator. So yeah, if you haven't read this book, then I really recommend you do it, because it's very, very interesting to read about psychological patients in the 1960s. Okay, now for 2 nonfiction books. The first one is Joyful by Ingrid Feta Lee, The Surprising Power of Ordinary Things to Create Extraordinary Happiness. I liked this book. It was cute. I gave it 3 stars. I mean, the concepts were very interesting. Honestly, I have read a lot of self-help and self-improvement books in the past, so nothing in this book was really new to me, but I think it was packaged in a really easy to swallow way for anyone who might be new to the self-improvement genre. And it had, good concepts, good writing, and it wasn't dense at all. And I really liked the audiobook too. The next nonfiction book was Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepard. And I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I listened to the audiobook, which is read by the author, which is always great. And I could not stop listening to it. I had it playing almost straight for 2 days until I finished it. It was so, so interesting. He was Britain's leading forensic pathologist, so you hear about his experiences dealing with dead bodies, and he is so respectful to all the victims of the crimes. It was just so well written, and you gain a really big respect for the field. So I definitely highly recommend this book. The next book is The Ascent to Godhood by J.Y. Young, and it is the 4th book in the Tenserate series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. It's a silk punk fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi maybe series of novellas, and you know how I love sci-fi fantasy novellas, and I actually have the first two with me here because I love them so much. Um, yeah, it is just an amazing series. Look at this cover art. It is so beautiful. I love them. Um, it's just such a great series, and of course, queer, by a queer author, queer characters in this fourth book as well. So I really, really recommend reading this series if you haven't already. This is one of my all-time favorites. The next book is another modern classic, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I'd had never read any Agatha Christie books before, so I was really excited, and I loved this so much. You can really see why she's called the Queen of Mysteries. It was just so well written, really, really captivating to listen to, which is what I did. It was just so, so well written, and all the characters really came to life as well. So definitely recommend this one. The next book was The Snowman by Jo Nesbø. Jo Nesbø, maybe? I really disliked this book. I was so sad because, it was October, Halloween, spooky time, and this is a crime novel, and it's a really highly recommended crime novel, like thriller, horror. And I love reading those books, so I was so disappointed when I hated this book. But it was just, again, the protagonist was the most boring, straight white male ever. Like, just so boring. And the whole book was incredibly misogynistic. Like, just absolutely disgusting. Like, and obviously I can tell the difference between, when an author is writing misogynistic characters that are meant to be seen as bad, but that is not what was happening here. Literally every woman was described by her appearance in such a disgusting, sexualized way, and the main character got to have sex with any woman he wanted, and there was just so much degrading language towards women, and it wasn't even that great a mystery, I didn't think. Like, it was pretty obvious who the snowman was, to me at least, pretty far ahead, so I don't know. I do not recommend this. The next book I really highly recommend. It is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nhi Vo. I loved this novella so much, and I'm so excited that there's another one coming out soon. I loved it so much. It is queer. The main character is non-binary. Yes, we are here for this. And it's based in kind of an Asian-inspired world. It's just magical. The writing is great, incredible writing. The story is really, really captivating, and I really highly recommend this. And she also has another book coming out in 2021, which I'm very excited for as well. The next book is actually a poetry collection, Matter the Wreckage. Now, I have never really read any poetry that much, at least not of my own volition. Of course, I read some for school, and I liked this. Some of the poems were really, really interesting and well done. Some of them I didn't really like, or they didn't really resonate with me personally that much, but I'd recommend this poetry collection if you're interested in poetry. The next book is another poetry collection, which I'm sure you've heard of, Milk and Honey. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favorite books that I've read this whole year, and I can't believe it took me this long to read it, actually. I remember seeing it in a bookstore years and years ago, and just not picking it up because I felt like, it's too trendy, or whatever teenage Annie thought at the time, and I loved it. The poems were really, really beautifully written, and a lot of them spoke to some of my past experiences this year. So I think it was just the right time for me personally to read it. And I really highly recommend this. And I'm planning on reading her second collection of poems really soon as well. The next book is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I did not like this book, and again, I was so disappointed because the synopsis sounded amazing, but it just really fell flat. Like, the synopsis talks about this white family renting an expensive vacation home in the Hamptons on Long Island, where I'm actually from Long Island, so I was really interested in it because of that at first. And it's supposed to be a thriller, which I don't really think it was. I don't think it was a thriller. It was just a weird book. And this black family, who actually owns the house that is being rented out as a vacation home, comes, and the synopsis made it sound like there was going to be like some great big mystery between both families and like a lot of racial tension and stuff, which just really fell flat. There wasn't really that much to do about that at all. It was just strange, and nothing really happens until about halfway through the book, and then at the end, I mean, there's no great big mystery reveal or anything, and sometimes that can work. It can work sometimes to not have the mystery actually be revealed at the end of the book, but it just did not work for me, so I was very sad about that. The next book was a short little Japanese novel called Miss Ice Sandwich, and I read this on a whim one day. I was at work, but a lot of my classes had been canceled that day, so I had some extra time to read. So I downloaded the ebook, and I thought it was so cute. It's about this elementary school boy who goes to this grocery store every day, and he buys a sandwich from Miss Ice Sandwich, who he has a crush on. And it's just a really nice book. It deals with the subjects of grief as well, and I thought it was really well written. Very nice. The next book is, I guess, poetry as well. It's called The White Book by Han Kang. And I've read Han Kang's The Vegetarian and Human Acts in the past, and I really loved them. And I loved this book so much. It's just absolutely beautiful. All the poems and stories are about white objects that kind of tie into things of her past. And again, it deals with subjects like grief and getting over traumatic events in the past and family. And it's beautifully written. I highly recommend this book. More people need to read it. The next book is a short sci-fi novella called Fina by Nino Cipri. It was interesting, very strange, a very strange little book. I read this in the waiting room of the doctor's office one day. It wasn't great. It was on my to-read list because the characters are queer and it was sci-fi, so of course I had to read it. And it was fine. It just wasn't my style. It's about this IKEA-like store where a wormhole opens up and these two employees have to go on a mission to save one of their lost customers. And it was interesting. It's an interesting idea, but I think even though I usually love sci-fi novellas, I think this could have benefited from more editing and maybe being fleshed out a bit more, so things didn't feel as rushed and the characters didn't feel so flat. The next book was Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and I had resisted reading this. I think honestly because of the title, I really didn't know what to expect. And I have already read so many Stephen King books this year that I had thought to myself that I wouldn't read any more this year. but I am so glad I did. This was one of my favorite books of this year and of all time. Definitely the best Stephen King book I've ever read. Just absolutely amazing. The writing, of course. And it was so scary. Genuinely terrifying. Just amazing. Really, if you're gonna read any Stephen King book, read this one, please. The next book is another poetry collection called Our Numbered Days. It was fine. I didn't like it that much. I had listened to him reading his poem about OCD years ago, and I liked that. It was interesting. But a lot of these poems were just not great for me, personally. I don't know. A lot of them had like him cheating on his girlfriend as the theme, which I am not. Don't do that. Like, I am not a fan of, and you will gain no sympathy from me whether you write a poem about it or not. So I was not a fan of this personally. The next book is another modern classic, A Clockwork Orange. And I thought this book was really special. I had a hard time with the language of it. It was really hard to understand for me, but I appreciate the writing of it and the creativity that it took. I gave this book 3 stars. It was good. Obviously, the concept was very interesting. It just wasn't my favorite, but it's definitely something that everyone should consider reading. Okay, the next 2 books are both by Japanese authors. They're both short, and they're both very weird. 2 of the weirdest books I have ever read. The first one is Memoirs of a Polar Bear. I really loved this book. It's about these 3 polar bears in the same family, 3 generations, living in the Soviet Union, and the third one is in the post-Soviet world, and it's just about their lives. The first polar bear is a circus bear, and it talks about her life, and I really liked it. It's just very strange because the polar bears are walking around and interacting with humans with no explanation, and it's just normal, and it's a very interesting read. I recommend it. The next one is Earthlings. Do not be fooled by this cute cover. This book was so weird. Not for the faint of heart. It is very graphic, sexually and violence-wise. It is disgusting at parts, but not in a bad way, if that makes sense. It was really good. I liked it a lot. But I don't think I could read it again because of how disturbing it is, especially at the end. But I really recommend it if you're interested. And she wrote The Convenience Store Woman as well, so if you're a fan of that book, you definitely like this one. And the last book I read this October is another nonfiction title, Say Nothing. I really am so glad that I picked up this book. I chose it because it was on the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2019, and I'm very glad that I decided to read it. I didn't really know much about the Troubles in Ireland. I mean, I knew they happened. I've watched Dairy Girls, so I had a little bit of background, and, I knew about Bloody Sunday, but that's it. And this book was really informative. I listened to the audiobook, and it was read by a narrator with a beautiful Irish accent, but he was also easy to understand. The only thing that docked this book down from 5 stars for me is that it was so dense with information that I had to keep taking breaks. Like, I could only listen to about a chapter a day, really, so it took me a long time. But it was very interesting and very important, an important part of history to read and learn about. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. And if any of you read any of these same books, or if you want to read these books, please let me know down below in a comment. And I hope to see you again real soon. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Bye!